for putting up with the rain. And thank you for coming out. What we're going to do today is have speakers, a block of speeches, and then we're going to march along Macquarie Street and through the CBD, returning to this spot. After we get back here, there's going to be music, there's going to be entertainment, hang around for networking, and there's going to be stalls and all sorts of things for you to do. So please, stay with us despite the weather.
Well, we're here today to launch the next phase of the campaign to protect Tasmania's forests and to basically stop this pulp mill. I first bumped into guns back in 1986 when they were logging the Lemantine forest, which I'm pleased to say are now on the World Heritage List. And at that stage, they were just a small company with a bad attitude. And 20 years later, they're a big company with a bad attitude. About 40% of the carbon that's in the atmosphere at the moment comes from the destruction and logging of forests around the world since the Industrial Revolution. About 20% of Australia's current emissions comes from logging and clearing. And in Tasmania, about 18 million tonnes of CO2 is put into the atmosphere every year, which is the equivalent of about 4.6 million cars on the road. So forget about the log trucks. The carbon impact of the logging in Tasmania is absolutely horrendous. And what it means is that you can't deal with climate change unless you deal with forests. And that's why we say this pulp mill is a climate crime. Win, lose or draw at this federal election, the community is going to stop this pulp mill. Now, that doesn't mean you shouldn't maximise your vote against this pulp mill at the election, quite the contrary. But don't sit there on election night watching either Rudd or Howard get elected and feel depressed. Just think, right, good, that distraction's out of the way, now we're really going to sort these turkeys out. They reckon they're pretty smart, that's all right. But how smart do you have to be to figure out that if you, like ANZ have just done, give guns a $1.5 billion line of credit, think about that, $1.5 billion line of credit, how much bad stuff do you think's going to happen? I think a lot. I mean, it's not like these guys don't have a track record. It's not an accident that the chairman of Guns ended up in jail for trying to bribe a politician. It's not an accident that they seem to be able to grease the wheels of democracy to suit themselves, no matter how bad their idea is. So I can think of a lot of things that wouldn't happen if these bankers were just a bit more responsible. And this is a pledge that says we're not going to do business with people who are funding this pulp mill. This is the beginning of an ethical investment campaign that will rock the financial foundations of Australia. Let me tell you, no one has ever gone after these guys in the way that we're intending to. We can't do it by ourselves, but together we are going to be unstoppable. Thanks for coming.
Thank you very much, and thank you for having me back in Tasmania. You get off the plane here, you breathe the clean air, and you know you're back in God's country. It's the most beautiful place on earth. You know, I'm up here with people who have spent their lives fighting these issues, and I'm just a newcomer. But at least I found my voice. It's taken me 25 years. It was 25 years ago I rafted the Franklin River. I didn't raft it as a protester, I rafted it for an adventure with some mates. When we put our raft in at the bridge, I was just there for some fun. But when we came out 5 days later, and I drifted by those 1,000-year-old trees, and I'd seen those great swathes of moss run down to the river, and I had my gut churn when I heard the rapids roar, and then I drifted along with a wedge-tailed eagle over me in the quiet stretches. When I came out into Macquarie Harbour, I was a different person. So it might have taken me a long time to find my voice, but at least I have it now. Do you know Malcolm Turnbull, the Federal Minister for the Environment, has never been down to the Tamar Valley to see the Guns pulp mill site? And yet, in the brochures that he's putting out in the seat of Wentworth, all of which are coloured green, there's no Liberal Party blue on them, they're all green because the pulp mill has driven him into a corner of fear. Do you know, in the tiny little paragraph about the Guns pulp mill there, he says things like, this mill will be built in a heavily industrialised area. The man has never seen it. He's never stood as I did on one bank of the river with Bob Brown. I know you're out there somewhere, Bob, and you should be up here speaking instead of me, but anyway, I'll do what I can. Let me just say, Turnbull never went there. He never saw what that site is like. Heavily industrialised area, tell that to all the wine growers who live across the river. He put in his brochure that this pulp mill will have no impact on the forests. Can you believe that? Can you believe that? He said the only wood that would go into it was timber that would have been wood chipped anyway, and yet there is any amount of documentation to say that that's not true. Malcolm Turnbull said to me many times during this debate, because he rang me many times, I can assure you, he said, I don't like this pulp mill any more than you do, but what can I do about it? Malcolm, we elected you to tell us what you can do, not what you can't do. And I urge everybody in this election to think about voting against something. Normally in elections you vote for someone or for something. But in this election, vote against the mill. Vote against the mill. Vote for the Greens if you want to. Vote for an independent if you want to. I don't care who you vote for, but vote against the mill. I'll tell you the words and you tell me what you can do with them. They're very simple, and they've been running in my head like a chant, and they go, pulp the mill, we can, we will. Pulp the mill, we can, we will. Pulp the mill, we can, we will. Now can we give one huge shout so they'll hear it up there? I'll give you the count of 2 if you'll do the shout. I've got my voice, have you got yours? 1, 2. Pulp the mill! We can, we will! Wow, thank you. All I can tell you is this. I'm 64 years old. It's taken me a long time to find my voice, but I promise you this, I won't lose it. Thanks.
Our next speaker, Richard Flanagan, was once told by our esteemed Premier Lennon that his writing wasn't welcome in Tasmania. He didn't care, because that's a Premier who doesn't represent the people. We've heard a lot about our opposition parties that don't represent the people. So I just want to make a quick reinforcement and celebration of the people that do represent the people. I'd like to acknowledge Ben Quinn, who had the courage to leave the Liberal Party and stand up for you. I want to acknowledge Terry Martin. He had the courage to face the so-called wrath of his party, and end up a stronger, better, honourable man. I want to acknowledge Kerry Finch, who as a true independent represents you and independent thinking. And I'd like to acknowledge the Tasmanian Greens who have battled in the Parliament here against such negativity, such adversity, so valiantly. And I'd like to acknowledge Senator Bob Brown, because he has fought, he together with Christine Milne has fought long and hard for very tiring years for our wild places and the future of Tasmania. Whether you count the Wyalangta case where he took on Forestry Tasmania in court, whether you count mobilising his party on the mainland to campaign on the pulp mill issue. He's always stood up for what is right for our environment and for the future of Tasmania. Richard Flanagan needs no introduction. Please stick with his speech and join him on the march around Macquarie Street. We will return here where there is music, where there is stalls, where there is networking. Richard Flanagan.
Thank you. I've been asked to speak loudly because this square has not been so full since that fateful rally here to save the Franklin River. This weather reminds me of another day, a sad day, the day of Peter Dombrovskis's funeral, when Tasmania was stunned to discover that Australia and the world grieved for that man because he had, with one picture, one photograph, one image of our country, changed Australian history. I pay tribute to Peter and I pay tribute to Jeff Cousins, because the greatest lie they ever sell us is that one person can't change anything. One person is what changes everything. We have come here today not to weep for the soul of our island home, but to save it. We can stop this mill, we must stop this mill, and by God we will stop this mill. We have watched our Tasmania raped as they chanted their lies. They redefined rainforest as wet sclerophyll, old growth as mixed growth, clear felling as aggregated retention, pillage as progress, greed as good, truth as lies, patriots as traitors. We now know that the mill failed to meet numerous RPDC guidelines and was never capable of meeting them. We now know that Gun's own evidence was riddled with flaws and inaccuracies. We now know this mill is a monstrosity that threatens not only our health, but our forests, our wildlife, our seas, our water, our economy, our very future. We now know guns can only make money if we pay for their profits with subsidies. In the last 20 years, $1 billion of taxpayers' money, our money, has gone in subsidies to the Tasmanian forestry industry, an industry that destroys more and more, employs less and less, and takes everything. The AMA has warned political leaders in Tasmania that they will be personally responsible for any health problems arising from the pulp mill. Only in Tasmania, instead of giving money to the hospitals to make the sick well, would a government give money to a company to make the world sick. Nearly 2 decades after its then chairman Eddie Rouse's failed attempt to corrupt Parliament, Guns now is so powerful that leading national politicians of all persuasion acknowledge the real power in Tasmania is not the government but Guns itself. This is not a Tasmania I any longer recognise. This is Bajelki Peterson's Queensland, and it is time we took our Tasmania back from the lies, back from the intimidation, back from the threats, from the character assassinations, the blacklistings. Because it is our Tasmania, not one company's fiefdom. We have suffered for too many years, them turning Tasmanian against Tasmanian, seeking to make us forget that what joins us is always greater than what divides us. That forest worker and conservationist, union man and greenie woman, southerner and northerner, liberal and Labor and Green, all share a great love for our island and for our people. Let us come together, whatever our politics, and bring this rotten era to an end. We say to Australia, Tasmania is here today, and Tasmania is saying, we do not want this pulp mill. We want a royal commission into what has happened here, because nothing other than a royal commission will establish the truth of what has gone so terribly wrong. Nothing less will clear away the stench that now surrounds this project, and nothing unless will allow Tasmania to have a new beginning. How can Kevin Rudd claim to be fair dinkum about climate change when he is promising more money and more support to a pulp mill that will burn 500,000 tonnes of forest a year in the monstrosity of its electricity generator? How can it be that the forest John Howard promised to save in 2004 is being logged today? How can it be that the forestry jobs John Howard promised to save were sacrificed by guns and no one held Howard accountable? It is this way because both Labor and Liberal leadership dance to the donor, and we in Tasmania pay with the highest unemployment rates and the greatest levels of poverty in the nation. I know it is hard for loyal Labor and Liberal supporters to not vote for their parties, but only that will drive home to the cynical power brokers of these parties that they must now respond to the wishes of the people and not the dictates of corporate greed. If it takes standing on the road to that pulp mill site and placing all that we have left, our bodies, between their machines and our home, we will stand there. We will stand there in peace and in pride. We will stand there united against hate and against greed, joined in our love for our island. And if we are arrested and thrown in jail, then we will go to jail in our tens, we will go to jail in our hundreds, we will go to jail in our thousands, and Paul Lennon will have to build 7 new prisons to house all the people who will come and who will keep on coming. I hope it doesn't come to that, but if it does, I will stand on that road. Put down your umbrellas and raise your hand if you'll stand there with me. Raise your hand so Kevin Rudd can see he was wrong. Raise your hand so Peter Garrett can see that people actually care. Raise your hand so John Howard can see this matters. Raise your hand so that ANZ, Perpetual, AMP and the Commonwealth Bank can see that they will have to deal with the fallout of the biggest civil disobedience campaign in Australian history since the Franklin blockade if they do not take action now. Now is the time for our turning. Now is the season for our change. Now must come the moment when we no longer are cowed, when we cease to be silent, when we speak the truth to power and say no to this pulp mill and yes to a future in which we are governed in the spirit in which we live, with goodness, with the interest of others in our heart and not the leash of greed tearing at our throat. Now is that hour. Now is our future. The journey is long, the road is dark and frightening, but I know together we can reach our destination, the Tasmania of which we all dream, where all are welcome and where all prosper, made no longer of lies, but of truth, built not of rich men's hate, but our love for our island and for each other. Our love, our Tasmania. Let's take it back. Let's start marching. Thank you.